I'd like to talk to you about your future career success, and specifically about how to get into the graduate program or business school of your choice as a launching pad towards your goals, towards your dreams, towards your future life aspirations. Right? You've decided that going to graduate school can help you get there. But unfortunately, one major obstacle stands in your way: the GRE. I was talking to the admissions director of a top 15 business school recently, and I asked her, what aspect of the application process is most important? And she started by giving me the company line and talking about how it's all important, about how they look at everything. But then with sort of, a wink, wink, she admitted that a low GRE score can hurt your chances of being accepted more than any other one thing, short of, say, an ethical breach or a major character flaw. They know it, I know it, and you know it. Your ability to get a really high GRE score is crucial for your ability to get into the business or graduate school of your choice. Now, that's why I'm here. My name is Brett Etheridge, founder of Dominate the GRE, the industry's most unique method for empowering you to dominate the GRE. And for the last really more than a decade now, I've worked with hundreds of students just like you and taught them, empowered them to dramatically improve their GRE score and get into the graduate school of their choice all over the world. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I don't know many people who like taking standardized tests, right? In fact, they sort of dread it. But I have good news for you. The GRE is a beatable test. That's right, there are no secrets. We know exactly what is on it if you learn the content, kind of the way of attacking the test, strategies. And that's why I'm really excited, because over the coming days, I'm going to be releasing a free series of videos for you teaching you exactly that, exactly how to dominate this test called the GRE. Starting with this video. In this video, I'm going to demystify the GRE for you. I'm going to pull back the curtain on a really crucial GRE math concept. We're going to get very, very specific, very practical in this video. We're going to look at this concept. It's a concept that tends to give students fits, but we're going to look at it from lots of different angles. I'm going to teach you some really cool strategies around it that you can apply to other question types as well. And if you just apply what you learn in this video, I guarantee you, you're going to get a lot more right answers on test day, which of course will improve your GRE score right out of the gate. Plus, be on the lookout for the rest of those videos as well as they come out to learn other aspects of the GRE as well. So I hope you're excited about that. Stick around for that. But first, we need to step back, and I want to kind of take a big picture look at this obstacle, right? This obstacle that I had to overcome and that you're going to have to overcome if you're serious about that next chapter of your life. And I want to start by having a conversation about how you really learn to excel at anything in life, including the GRE. Right? So I hope you're ready. Let's dive in. Let's head on back into my office. Now, I said that the GRE is a beatable test, and that's absolutely true. Right? It's not like you're going to show up on test day and see questions that you've never seen before or had no idea were going to be on there. There aren't going to be any major surprises if you prepare accordingly. And that's good news, because we know everything that is on the GRE. We know all of the major question types that you're going to see. We know exactly how it's scored and so on. So the question becomes, if it's a beatable test, how do you beat it? How do you really get good at anything that you want to excel at in life, including the GRE? Let me tell you a quick story. So a couple summers ago, my wife and I moved down to Cartagena, Colombia. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's a beautiful place, right? And we wanted to spend the summer living on the beach. I know, tough life, right? And it was spectacular. And the thing with Cartagena is we were on a beach a little bit north of the city that's famous for its kite surfing. Now, every night, certainly every day, but every night, kind of as the sun started to go down, dozens of kite surfers would be out on the water, kind of skimming seemingly effortlessly across the waves. They'd be jumping and doing backflips, and it looked spectacular. And I decided it was something that I wanted to do as well. Take a look at this picture. This was actually literally the view from our balcony. Who wouldn't want to get out on the water and do kite surfing like that? Now, the problem is I had never kite surfed before, so I was going to learn, just like you're going to learn the GRE. Now, I had never really even snowboarded or skateboarded, so I had no frame of reference coming into it, things that I thought might help me succeed a little bit. I was starting completely from scratch. And let's talk about the process a little bit. So the very first thing that happened, of course, was that I needed actual instruction. Before I even got out on the water, a teacher taught me basic things, right? He literally as basic as, okay, stick your finger up in the air and try to figure out which way, which direction the wind is coming from, right? If you're going to kite surf, you have to know where the wind is coming from. And here's how you put on the board, and here's how you control the kite. We did a lot of work on land, kind of moving the handle from 10 to 2 and so forth. If you've ever kite surfed, you know what I'm talking about. And that's exactly the same thing that's going to happen for you on the GRE, right? I needed to learn some basic content. So I call this the success triad, the GRE success triad, and really it's just a way of thinking about the interplay between three crucial components of dominating the GRE. And as you embark on this journey, as you start to prepare and study for the GRE, you need to really focus in these three areas, and you need to understand their interplay. And in this video, we're going to get very specific, and I'm going to show you very concrete examples about exactly how this interplay works. And with only one, you're not going to get there. With only two, you're not going to get there. You need all three of these things. And the first of the three components is content, right? You actually have to learn some content. At the end of the day, you need to know how to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle. You need to know something about quadratic equations. You need to beef up your vocabulary, and on and on and on, right? There's underlying content that you have to learn. There's no getting around that. Just like I had to learn some basic content about how to kite surf. But is that enough on its own? No. It's not, right? If you just study really hard and learn lots of formulas and rules, is that going to help you get a really high GRE score? Surprisingly, no. Because what's missing, right? So here's what happened for me, as you might expect, right? So the big day came when it was finally time for me to go out on the water. I thought I knew everything, and what happened? What do you think happened, right? The very first time I was sitting in the water, I'm like bobbing up and down in the water, and I finally tried to move the kite from 12 to 2 and pop out of the water. Didn't happen, did it? Not only didn't I get out of the water, the kite went slamming down into the ocean, and I literally spent the next 5 minutes sucking water while I tried to get this kite back out of the water so I could try again. It just didn't happen for me, did it? So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board. I said, wait, you told me what to do. I need some more help. I need some shortcuts. I need some strategies on how to get there a little bit faster, a little bit more efficiently. So the second major component of our success triad is strategy. And this, my friends, is absolutely crucial. When you think about what separates people who do really well on the GRE from those who don't, it's people who understand strategy. And we're going to talk about that more in this video and in the next video. For me, it was learning some tricks, some way. He said, okay, well, technically I told you to do this, but if you flex your arms a little bit more, it creates a little bit more tension, on the string, on the rope, and that'll pull the kite a little bit tighter, give you a little bit more resistance, and help you pop out a little bit faster. Once you stand up, keep your knees flexed a little bit so that you're not too rigid and you don't topple over, right? So every step of the way, he's like, okay, I taught you kind of what to do. Now I need to teach you how to actually do it more efficiently. Take a look at this string of photos. This is actually me in the water, and lo and behold, look what happens. I kept going back, I kept trying, I tried a third time and a fourth time, and you know what? By the fifth time or so, I actually popped up out of the water, and look at that. I'm kite surfing. But eventually it was no longer about just being able to actually stand up out of the water and kind of ride for a little bit. It was about trying to learn how to do tricks and jump waves and go both directions and turn around. And I wanted to actually get good at this thing. And so what's missing? When you think about the GRE success triad, what's the missing component? I knew what to do. I finally had some strategies to get there a little bit more efficiently, but ultimately I had to practice. Practice, 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 right? And the same is going to be the case for you on the GRE as well. You're going to have to learn some underlying content. And in this video, actually, I'm going to teach you some underlying content. Then I'm going to give you some strategies on how to get a right answer a little bit more effectively, a little bit more efficiently. But ultimately, what might happen is you now sit down with your GRE textbook and work some practice problems. And you're like, I watched this video where Brett taught me all this cool stuff, but I'm not quite sure how to do it on my own. Eventually, you just have to practice it, practice, practice it, build that muscle memory. You know, when it comes to kite surfing, for you, you have to build that same type of muscle memory, and there's no shortcut to just working dozens, if not hundreds, of practice problems as well. So I hope this concept makes sense to you. You know, again, when you think about who scores really well on the GRE, it's not just a matter of how smart you are. I alluded to that earlier. I'll give you a perfect example. I have a former student, her name was Leslie, and she contacted me and she said, Brett, I am just struggling and I don't understand why. I am a Duke graduate, right? So I went to Duke. I like to think that, you know, Dukies are fairly smart. And she said, I was an engineer, for goodness sakes. Why am I having so much trouble with the quantitative section? You know, and so she thought, hey, this should be easy for me because I have all of this background, this math background, but she couldn't quite break through. And we worked on it, and she realized it wasn't just a matter of always trying to do things the traditional way, but we worked on some different strategies, some different ways of coming at different problems. She went back to the drawing board, practice. Lo and behold, she ended up getting into Harvard Business School. So needless to say, she did very well. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, here's another one of my students, Pablo, from, interestingly enough, Colombia, who wrote me. You see a series of emails he wrote me. He wrote me and he started off by saying, look, I need your help. I want to increase my GRE score as I only scored a 145 in math and 150 in verbal. And he said, but look, you need to know that I have a very poor math background. And he literally is asking me, is there any hope for me? And the answer, of course, is there's hope for everybody. There's no secrets. You can learn everything that is on the GRE. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, you see, he's so ecstatic. He wrote me finally, and he said, I just finished the GRE. I got a 155 in verbal, 154 in math. And you might be thinking to yourself, man, those aren't like really high scores. I mean, it's above average, but maybe it's not going to get you into the schools you want to get into. That's okay. For Pablo, it was exactly what he needed. He's now working on his PhD. And look at that. Even in the math, that represents a 9-point increase in the math section. And that's a huge, huge increase relative to where he was starting from. And so can you score in the upper 160s? Of course. Can you get a 170? Of course. But for Pablo, this is what he needed. And even with that limited math background, he was able to make those breakthroughs. Now, here's my point with all this, right? Let's kind of wrap up this analogy so we can move on to the content of this video. My point is simply this. When I was kite surfing, you know, I would see some like fat, uncoordinated looking kids. I'm not trying to be mean. It's just the reality, also learning to kite surf, and they were able to successfully do it. In fact, they sometimes succeeded faster than I did. I was like, how is that kid or that person or that woman or whatever, like how are they jumping over waves and doing backflips and I can't even get up out of the water? I'm pretty athletic. I've played sports my whole life. Like, they're doing it. And on the flip side, you see these buff, athletic-looking people who you think, man, they should be a natural at this, and they struggle to get up, right? Leslie had a lot of the raw ingredients. She was incredibly intelligent, had a really strong math background, and yet she had some of the same struggles as Pablo, who maybe was more like the fat, uncoordinated kid, right? Not to be mean, but just like he had a little bit more to overcome, and yet both were able to succeed. And that's the exact same for you. The secret sauce is, again, learning the content. There's no substitute for that, but learning the strategy and the practice. And in this, and practicing over and over again until you know all of the question types forwards and backwards and can do them in your sleep. And that's what we're going to do in this 3-part series of videos. I've already talked about that. And today, what we're going to do is I want to actually teach you some core underlying content. I'll actually show you the interplay between these 3 things too, because I'm going to go from content to a little bit of strategy. Now, in the next video, we're going to focus exclusively on strategy. So if you haven't signed up, for the email series on this, be sure to go to my website and do that. Check your inbox for the next video so you can learn all of that strategy. But for today, we're going to look at a piece of content that gives students fits. It's a common word problem you're going to see on the GRE, and it's the motion problems. Take a look at the sample question. So we have car A that's 20 miles behind car B, which is traveling in the same direction along the same route as car A. Car A is traveling at a constant speed of 58 miles per hour, and car B is traveling at a constant speed of 50 miles per hour. How many hours will it take for car A to overtake and drive 8 miles ahead of car B? And then you have your answer choices. Right, so it's a very straightforward multiple choice type of problem solving question on the quantitative section of the GRE. This is a question we're going to look at for the next little bit in this video, so why don't you go ahead and press pause, maybe give it a try on your own. And whether you have strategy or whether you try to just do it the traditional way, we're going to come back and we're going to look at it from a lot of different angles. So why don't you go ahead and just take a quick second, press pause, and then we'll come back and look at it in more detail. Okay, and before we dive in, I'll go back to the board here in a second and solve this with you. But just a quick kind of primer on motion problems. I promised you I was going to teach you some content. These are common word problems that you're going to encounter, and they don't have to be difficult, even though you may hate them, they may make you break out in a cold sweat. At the end of the day, motion problems are asking you to find distance traveled or rate of speed or time elapsed. The bottom line is some sort of interplay between the three major variables in the motion equation, which is that distance equals rate times time. Now that is a formula that is worth knowing, so make sure to jot it down on your scratch paper. It may be a formula that you already remember or have memorized. I always say, look, rather than memorizing formulas, just think about a rate that you're already familiar with. And for most of us, we're familiar with driving in a car, and that's either miles per hour or kilometers per hour. And so rate equals miles, distance, per time, hours, or kilometers per hour, depending on where in the world you are. And the point is that's the rate. And so if I actually divided, the right side of the equation here by t, I would have rate equals distance over time, right? Rate equals miles per hour, for example. Distance over time, just cross multiplying the time across, you get distance equals rate times time. So you don't really have to memorize the formula, but just kind of understand where it comes from. And that formula is going to govern motion problems, and the strategy is you always want to draw a diagram of what's happening, and you're going to come across three major question types, three different types of motion problems. Motion in opposite directions, I call them collision problems because this is where trains or cars or whatever are kind of going towards each other and might quote unquote collide. Same direction problems, and that's actually what we're looking at in this example, and then round trip questions. I'm going to run through them quickly just to teach them to you, and this is where you're going to have to practice them because we're only going to go over one of them in this video. But that first question type is opposite direction or collision questions, and this is where you see the arrows, and you always want to draw this on your scratch paper. You have a person or car or train or whatever, and they're traveling towards each other. And the way you solve these problems is by setting up the following equation. That person one's distance formula, right? Person one has his own distance equals rate times time formula, his own rate, his own time, whatever. And his distance formula, like D1, plus D2, distance formula 2, is going to equal the total distance. Right? So that's all I'm going to say on this. You'll see those in the practice. What we're going to focus on here is kind of category number 2, which is catch-up questions, and this is where D1 equals D2. They're moving in the same direction. So person 1 is moving the same direction, person 2 might start a little bit later or go at a different rate, whatever it is, but they're going kind of roughly in the same direction. And so the way you set these up algebraically is D1 equals D2, and don't worry if this doesn't make sense because I'm going to illustrate it here on the board in just a moment. So kind of take a screenshot of this slide because this is going to govern the catch-up questions. And then the round trip questions look more like this, right? Person 1 maybe goes out, maybe drives to school and walks home or something like that. So different rate, maybe different time, but you still set up the algebraic equation as D1 equals D2. So file that away, but let's come back to our example. Okay, so how did you do with this question on your own? I'm going to start by teaching you the traditional algebraic way of solving it. Remember I said you have to learn some content. I'm going to teach you that content before teaching you some strategy on how to do this a little bit faster. And the other thing too is on the GRE, as you know, you may have numeric entry questions where some of the strategies don't work quite as well. And so you may just have to solve some problems algebraically. And so there's no shortcut for knowing how to do some basic underlying stuff. So here we have a multiple choice question. Some certain strategies are going to come in very handy, but let's look at the traditional algebraic approach. Now it's a catch-up question, and we always start by drawing the diagram, right? And so we have car A that's moving in one direction, And then we have car B that's moving in the same direction. And let me start kind of basic, right? So in general, you're going to start catch-up questions like this. And we said that to solve this thing, you let D1, and I'm going to do it dA, like car A's distance formula, is going to equal car B's distance formula, because we remember that distance equals rate times time, right? So that's the governing formula for these types of questions. And so we want to set up car A's formula and car B's formula. And how do we do that? And you might be thinking, but Brett, you didn't draw the diagram correctly. You're exactly right. So let's actually amend this a little bit. First of all, it says that car A starts behind car B, right? So here's car A's starting point. Car B is already up here, 20 miles ahead. Does that make sense? And the question says not only is it starting behind car B, but it's actually going to not only catch up. So usually on catch-up problems, it's just like, okay, how long is it going to take to catch up or something like that. Here it says not just catch up, but overtake, right, car B by 8 miles. So there's another 8 miles that car A is going to go further than car B. So really, the difference is 28 miles. So this is how you amend the question, right? This is a harder variation of a traditional motion problem on the GRE. Because I said, wait, the way we solve these is by setting dA equal to dB. But the thing is, are those lines equal? No, I mean, if it were a traditional catch-up question, you would have, okay, car A and then car B, and sure enough, the distances are the exact same. And so you would just let dA equal dB. But here, that's our starting point. This makes sense. But technically, one of the cars is going a little bit further, isn't it? Which car is going further? Car A is going further by 28 miles. So how do we change, how do we amend our formula that we're going to be using? dA equals dB? No, not quite. How do we equate them? And this is an important understanding. You might have to press pause to like filter this. A lot of students are like, Brett, I don't understand why you're adding 28 to the other side. Yes, car A is going 28 miles further in this example, but do we add then the 28 to car A's distance or car B's distance? To equate the two lines, we actually need to add 28 to car B's distance. My dotted line proves it, right? If we're going to have these lines be the exact same length, in other words, the distances traveled are going to be the same, I actually need to add 28 miles to car B's distance to now equate these. Now you might be thinking, well, Brett, but car A is the one that went further. That's fine. Another way you could think about it is actually dA minus 28 would equal car B's distance. Either of those, like this is like scenario 1 or scenario 2, either equation would work. Does that make sense? So it actually doesn't matter, whichever way you like to think about it. I just like to think about them as kind of being equal. And so I'm just going to add 28 to car B's distance to equate those. And now we simply set up those equations and solve them. And like I said, each car is going to have its own distance, rate, time formula. So distance A, car A travels, is going to be rate times time. Well, what's car A's rate? Obviously, it's a little bit faster. It's 58 miles per hour, right? It's obviously faster. That's the only way it's going to make up ground and catch up. 58 miles an hour times T for time. That's just a variable. We don't know how long. In fact, that's what we're solving for. How long is it going to take? So I don't know. I'm going to have to solve for T. And then car B's formula, dB, is going to be its rate, which of course is only 50 miles an hour, times T for time. Now we're lucky in this question because they're leaving at the same time. Some questions will ask you or say there's a change in time, like maybe car B or car A waited an hour before starting, for example, and so you would have to adjust T because T wouldn't be the same in both cases. Again, this is where practice comes in. So you need to learn different variations of these questions. But for this example, the time domain is the same. They both are starting at the same time. The major difference in this question is just that they're traveling different distances. And we've accounted for that. And so now to solve the question, let's go down here. We said dA equals dB plus 28. So dA is 58t. And that's going to equal dB, 50t. But of course, we have to equalize these by adding 28 to the right side. So now we can subtract 50t from both sides, minus 50t, minus 50t. So we get 8t equals 28. So t equals 28 divided by 8, which equals 3, because it goes in 3 times, 3.5 times, 3.5 hours. Answer choice E, right? Algebraic. You know, if you had a numeric entry question instead of a multiple choice question, as you see here, where you have to provide your own answer, knowing how to do it the traditional algebraic way certainly helps, certainly makes sense, and you would have the ability of solving the way we just did and actually typing in the answer 3.5. But here we do actually have a multiple choice question, and so that lends itself to some additional strategies we can employ. I mean, if you followed all of this, great. Definitely rewatch this video, make sure you learn how to actually do this the traditional algebraic way. But ultimately, your goal on the GRE, your ability to get a high score rests in your ability to get more right answers more quickly, more efficiently, and know how to get right answers even if you didn't immediately know how to do the problem the traditional way. So if you looked at this and you're like, man, this kind of is over my head, or I see what you did now, but I really would like to do it a different way, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that, because are there more efficient ways of getting the same answer? And of course, the answer is yes. And I'm going to show you 2 of those ways right now, because again, I'm wanting to make sure you understand this interplay between these 3 components of the success triad, so that when you're preparing for the GRE, as you are right now, you know how to study, how to focus your time, how to really attack this thing in the best possible way. Now, the first strategy I'm going to teach you, it's kind of like category A, is actually a non-standard technique that I teach in my free session. So if you haven't watched my free session yet, here's where you can get it. You see a picture on my website, just click on free session, opt in for that, and you'll get a lesson that's going to teach the strategy in a lot more detail. I know a lot of you watching this video have already watched that free session. Maybe that's how you learned about this video series. That's awesome. I'm going to apply it here really quickly as well. So let's dive in. And the strategy is very simple. It says, wait a second, all that cool stuff that Brett just did? Well, here's the reality. The answer choices are right there for me. In other words, I can either solve and try to hopefully come up with 3.5 on my own, or what if I just kind of take the answer choices, because one of those 5 answer choices is correct, kind of plug it back in, it's called working backwards, and just see if it actually works. Does that make sense? And so that's exactly what we're going to do. So rather than setting up algebraic equations, we still want to know that distance equals rate times time, but the strategy says, okay, well, what if the correct answer is actually, and we start with answer choice C for reasons I explained in the video, but notice it happens to be kind of that middle term, that middle number in the answer choices, right? What if the answer is that it is going to take car A, what if the answer is, it's going to take car A 2.5 hours? Like, I don't know if it is or not. Well, we know it's not because we already solved it and we know the correct answer. But if you're attacking this on the front end and you're not sure, let's just test answer choice C and see if it actually works. And if it does, that's your answer. And if it doesn't, it's going to enable you to eliminate some wrong answer choices, right? And so answer choice C says, okay, what if car A travels for 2.5 hours? Well, we already said car A's distance equals rate times time. So car A's distance is rate, 58 miles per hour, times, now we don't use the variable t, we're just going to assume the answer is 2.5 hours. 58 miles an hour for 2.5 hours, that's just 58 times 2.5, do it on your calculator, 145 miles. Okay, well, what is car B? Like, how do we know if that's right? I mean, that is how far car A would go, but how do we know if that answers all the parameters of the question? Well, car B, in that case, its distance is going to be its rate, 50 miles an hour, times the same 2.5 hours, and that works out to 125 miles. So is that correct? Is that how long they were traveling? No, because how much further did car A go than car B in this case? 145 minus 25 is a difference of 20 miles, not the 28 miles we know it needs to be, right? Because the problem says it started 20 miles behind, but needs to go 8 miles further. So actually we need a scenario where car A will have traveled 28 miles further. So answer choice C cannot be correct. Does that make sense? I hope this is a breath of fresh air for you. And this is what I'm talking about. Not just knowing some content, but knowing faster, more efficient ways of getting right answers. And so now we know that actually car A needs to have gone a little bit further compared to car B. So we can eliminate answer choices A and B as well, and now just test D or E. And of course we know the answer is E, but I probably on test A would just test answer choice D now, simply because 3 is an easy number to work with. So let's assume answer choice D. What if car A travels 3 hours instead? So distance A equals 58 times 3.0 hours now, which ends up being 174 miles. And then car B at 50 miles an hour for the same 3 hours is only going to go 150 miles. That distance is, the difference is now 24 miles difference. So car A has gone 24 miles further than car B. We're moving in the right direction, right? Here it was only 20 miles further. Here it's 24 miles further, but answer choice D is still not the correct answer, but that only leaves answer choice E, which of course ends up being the correct answer. At this point, you don't even have to confirm it on your scratch paper. You know it has to be the right answer. And so what a much easier way to get a right answer, isn't it? I hope you like this strategy. I'm actually going to revisit this strategy in the next video in this series, and then teach you some other really cool non-standard math strategies just like this. So again, definitely make sure to look out for that next video. But I want to show you yet another strategy, an even easier way of getting the right answer. So this is kind of like strategy B, and this would actually work for numeric entry, right? So again, so often on the GRE, and you might have come to this video, come to the GRE thinking, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at math. I had to learn all this, I've got to learn all this stuff. The reality is what you need to do is learn how to outthink the test makers. Your job is to get right answers. My job is to teach you how to get those right answers more efficiently. So you can either learn the algebraic approach, which I've taught you. You can learn some non-standard strategies, which I just showed you here and will teach in more detail in the next video and also teach in the free session. But the other reality is just to kind of like use a little bit of logic. Use your brain. Look for shortcuts. And one thing to understand about rates is that rates are additive. Rates are additive, meaning if I travel at, well, let's say we have opposite directions, right? And this is car A and this is car B. And car A is going at a rate of 20 miles an hour. And car B is going at a rate of 25 miles an hour. Those rates are additive, meaning collectively they're closing the gap. So the rate combined rate is going to be 45 miles per hour, right? And I teach this in a little bit more detail in my course videos, but just understand that concept that rates are additive. So they would be closing the gap at a collective rate of 45 miles an hour. The same holds with this problem, doesn't it? In other words, car A is going at 58 miles an hour. Car B is only going at 50 miles an hour. So how quickly is car A catching up? So not only are they additive, but they're subtractive, right? The point is car A is catching up at a rate of 8 miles per hour. Does that make sense? And so that becomes very easy. If car A, so the catch-up rate equals 8 miles per hour. Every hour, car A is making up 8 miles, and so we know the problem says it has to make up a distance of 28 extra miles. The 20 it started behind plus the 8 extra has to go. So how long is it going to take for car A to catch up by 28 miles? 28 miles divided by 8 miles per hour equals 3.5 hours. Look at that. Well, Brett, how come you just didn't teach me that like 15 minutes ago in this video when we'd already be done? Well, because I had to kind of set the stage and make sure you understand that we sometimes do have to learn that underlying content, but at the end of the day, sometimes there are faster ways. Not always, but sometimes there are. And in fact, a lot of times there are. And so the strategies, that again, I just taught you here with working backwards, but now just thinking, you know what, rather than doing all this algebraic stuff and like dA equals dB plus 28, and I forgot whether I'm supposed to add 28 or subtract 28, well, look at this. It's catching up at 8 miles an hour. How long is it going to take to do that if it has to make up 28 miles? Boom, 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 done. 15 seconds. You've got a right answer. You're on to the next question with plenty of time now in your back pocket for future questions. So I hope you see how powerful this is. I hope you see what's going on here. Now, ultimately, you know the ins and outs of motion problems. I've just kind of gone over them ad nauseum. I've taught you the 3 different types. I've taught you the formulas. I've taught you that rates are additive. I've taught you shortcuts. We've kind of tackled part of content, but naturally, there's a lot more than motion problems on the GRE. So as you're studying for the GRE, you need to learn content like I just taught you here for everything else, right? Triangles and circles and quadratic equations and simultaneous equations and vocabulary and all of that type of stuff. And that's your job. There's no secrets, as I already mentioned. You can master all of it. It's not rocket science, but you do have to put in the time. Then you have to learn some strategies to get things more quickly, but ultimately it comes down to practice because, what about, again, here, what if I had given you a round trip question instead? Well, now you have to apply what I just taught you and see if you can apply it to collision problems or round trip problems, and then all the other question types as well. So that's where practice comes in. Let me give you some guidelines. I told you in this video, I wanted to set you up with an actual game plan for success on the GRE. And I hope I've done that. I hope I've started to do that. But when it comes to practice, how should you do that? A few recommendations for you. The first is there's no shortcut, or there's no good alternative to just working lots and lots and lots of practice problems. And really what I think is the best source of practice problems is the book from the makers of the actual GRE. Now, this is the official guide to the GRE from the ETS, the makers of the GRE. Depending on when you're watching this video, there might have been an updated version of this book, so just make sure the book, if it doesn't look exactly like this, it still might be the right book. But the reality is this is a source of real former GRE questions. Lots of books out there, but I like this one because it's actual real former GRE questions from the makers of the test. So you need to be working hundreds of practice problems to identify all of the different question types. The other thing is full-length practice tests. You not only need to be able to do a lot of stuff and practice them, but you need to practice them under timed conditions because the GRE is a timed test. It's one thing to be able to do a problem like we just did if you've got 20 minutes to sit there and think about it and pause my video and rewind, but on test day you're going to have to do it, a lot more quickly. So you need to practice under time conditions. I sell up to 6 full-length practice tests on my website. Go to dominathegre.com if you want to grab some of those practice tests. Obviously some other resources for practice tests as well, including the ETS official website. My blog, my YouTube channel are great sources of some additional practice. Here's another website that I kind of allude to this in my course, but I'll give it to you here. It's called freerice.com, freerice.com. It's a great vocabulary practice website. My students have a lot of fun, and it's kind of progressive, meaning the more right answers you get, the harder they get, and eventually you get some serious GRE type vocabulary words, and it's contributing to a good cause. Every vocab word you get right donates, I think, 10 grains of rice to people in need around the world. So it's a fun resource for practicing vocabulary, so check that out as well. So there's some recommendations for you in terms of practice. Obviously my course, I have lots of worksheets with video answer explanations for all of the lessons in my course, so that's some great additional practice for you as well. But now you might be asking yourself, what now, right? What's next? And if you're like a lot of my students, you know, the number one thing I hear from most of my students is, Brett, it makes so much sense when you do it for me or help me think through it, but sometimes when I'm sitting there trying to do it on my own, I get stuck. I'm not quite sure how to proceed. I freeze up. You might be thinking, you know, if I had this problem and I had all the time in the world from the comfort of my own home with 20 minutes to sit here and work on it, of course I can get a right answer. But when I'm sitting there on test day and the clock is ticking away and seemingly like my future is hanging in the balance for this GRE, I freeze up, I'm stuck, I'm not quite sure how to proceed. If that's you, that's exactly what we're going to be covering in the next video. I've talked about the fact that we're going to be talking more about strategy, and I'm going to give you some great strategies on how to get unstuck when you're sitting there looking at a question and you're not quite sure what to do. So stick around for that, but for now I do have a question for you. I would like to know, what is the biggest challenge you are facing when you are studying for the GRE? Or maybe put another way, what aspect of studying the GRE concerns you the most? I want to help you with that. I want you to leave that comment or that question in the question area below, in the comments area below. I'm going to read them. I'm looking forward to reading them. I will answer you personally. So again, head on down to the comments, kind of click like. Everybody likes to get those likes, and then post your comment. What did you like about this video? What did you learn about this video? What was eye-opening to you? And then what concerns you the most about this process of studying for the GRE? I'm here to help you. I look forward to reading your comments, answering your questions, and seeing you in the next video to empower you further to dominate the GRE.